Lawrence Keller's office overlooked the railroad tracks stretching west toward the mountains. From his leather chair, he could trace every mile of steel his company had laid across the territory. 5 years of expansion, 40 miles of track, 3 switching stations and a maintenance depot. Progress had a price, and he'd always been willing to pay it. Papers covered his mahogany desk this February afternoon. Land acquisition documents waited for his signature. He scanned the acreage numbers and compensation amounts without reading the names. Legal handled the details. His job was vision, expansion, profit. The numbers looked good. His assistant knocked and entered. "Sir, there's a woman requesting a meeting. Says she represents some families affected by the railroad." Lawrence checked his pocket watch. "I have 15 minutes before the investor dinner. She's quite insistent." "Fine, send her in." He straightened the papers, preparing his usual speech about progress requiring sacrifice, about how civilization came to the frontier on iron rails, about fair market value and legal processes. He'd given this speech dozens of times to protesters and newspaper editors and town council members who didn't understand the cost of building an empire. The door opened. Catherine Morrison entered first. A woman perhaps 40 years old with steady eyes and a worn but dignified coat. Behind her came people. More people. They filed into his office until 3 families stood before his desk, cramming into the space he'd always kept carefully controlled. A young mother held a toddler on her hip while 3 other children clutched her skirts. Their coats were thin, patched at the elbows. An elderly couple stood together, the woman's hand trembling as she gripped her husband's arm. A young man and his wife, barely past 20, stood with their heads high but their eyes hollow. Lawrence's hand froze over the papers he'd been about to sign. Catherine stepped forward. "Mr. Keller, I'm Catherine Morrison. These are the families your railroad displaced last fall. We followed all legal protocols. I'm sure you did." Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "But you've never seen them. Have you let me introduce you properly?" She turned to the young mother. "This is Mary Wilson, 4 children. Your railroad bought the land her husband left her. Fair market value. Your lawyer said..." What they didn't mention was that she had nowhere else to go. Mary Wilson met his eyes. She didn't plead or accuse. She just stood there, real and undeniable. Catherine continued. "Thomas and Ellen Harper, married 53 years. Built their homestead with their own hands 40 years ago. It's your switching station now." The elderly woman's trembling intensified. Thomas held her closer. "James and Sarah Mitchell. Saved 7 years to buy their plot. Were planning to plant their first orchard this spring. Your surveyors demolished their cabin in an afternoon." Lawrence found his voice. "We paid compensation. Legal handled everything properly. You paid what the law required." Catherine said, "But you never watched Mary explain to her children why strangers were tearing down their home. You never heard Thomas ask where he's supposed to die now that the land he was born on belongs to railroad. Company number 47. The youngest Wilson child stared at Lawrence's silver inkwell on the desk. The thing probably cost more than their entire compensation. "I understand this is difficult," Lawrence began, "but progress requires..." "I didn't bring them here to debate progress," Catherine interrupted. "I brought them so you would see them. So the man who took everything would know they were real people, not just property lines on a map." The office felt suffocating. Too small for all these bodies. All this silent judgment. The scent of the children's worn clothes filled the air. Ellen Harper's hands shook with the same tremor his grandmother had before she died. Catherine shepherded the families toward the door. "I'll return tomorrow. Mr. Keller, we're going to discuss what making this right actually means." They filed out quietly. No shouting. No demands, just their presence, which somehow felt heavier than any accusation. Lawrence sat alone in his office as the door closed. The papers on his desk blurred. He could still smell Mary Wilson's children, could still see Ellen Harper's trembling hands. For the first time in 5 years, He wondered how many families he'd never counted. Catherine returned the next morning. Lawrence hadn't attended his investor dinner. He'd sat in his office until darkness fell, not lighting the lamps, trying to remember when he'd stopped seeing people and started seeing only property. She found him still at his desk, the same papers unsigned. "You didn't go home," she observed. "No." She sat in the chair across from him without being invited. "Good. That means you felt something." Lawrence looked at her, really looked. She wasn't young, but her face held strength that came from choosing purpose over comfort. Her coat was mended but clean. Her hands were work-worn but steady. "Who are you?" he asked. "I told you. Catherine Morrison. My husband was a surveyor. He died 3 years ago trying to protect a family's land from improper seizure. I continue his work. Why? Because someone has to care about what happens to people when progress comes through." She pulled a ledger from her bag and set it on his desk. "I've done the accounting you never did." Lawrence opened it. Names, addresses, families, dates of displacement, current locations, when known. Some entries just said, "Whereabouts unknown." 47 families. Catherine said quietly. "Across 5 years of your railroad's expansion, some were relocated poorly. Some never received full compensation. Some simply disappeared from the records." The pages felt heavy in his hands. Each name was a Mary Wilson, an Ellen Harper, a James Mitchell. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to see what you've done, really see it. Not as business, not as progress, as 47 families whose lives you disrupted. I can't undo the past." "No, but you can make amends." She leaned forward. "If you have the courage..." Lawrence set down the ledger. "You think building a few houses will make this right? I think doing nothing guarantees it never will be." He studied her face, looking for anger or judgment. He found neither. Just steady determination in something else. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just stubborn belief that people could be better than their worst choices. "Why do you think I'll help?" he asked. "Because you didn't go to your investor dinner last night. Because you're still sitting here looking at those papers you can't sign. Because somewhere inside the empire builder is the man who remembers what it felt like to lose everything." Lawrence's breath caught. "How did you..." "I do my research, Mr. Keller. I know about your family's farm in Ohio. I know what debt collectors took from your mother. I know you built all this so you'd never be powerless again." Her voice softened. "But you became the thing you feared. You became the one who takes..." The words hit like physical blows. "True. All true. I was protecting myself," he said quietly. "You were afraid. Fear makes us cruel. But courage can make us kind." She pushed the ledger closer. "This is your chance to choose courage." Lawrence opened the ledger again. 47 families. He'd signed every deed, approved every acquisition, collected every profit. And he'd never once asked what happened to the people after the lawyers finished their work. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Catherine pulled out a second list. Names, locations, current needs. "We start with the families in most desperate circumstances. Winter's hard. Some of them are barely surviving. And then we work through the rest. Every family. Proper relocation, fair compensation, restored dignity." She met his eyes. "It'll take months, maybe years. It'll cost you a fortune. Your business associates will think you've lost your mind." "Man, what if they're right?" "Then you'll have lost your mind doing the right thing. There are worse fates." Lawrence looked at the list, at the ledger, at Catherine's steady, challenging gaze. He thought of Mary Wilson's children in their thin coats, Ellen Harper's trembling hands, Thomas Harper asking where he was supposed to die. He thought of his mother's face when the bank took their Ohio farm. "You can't unfeel what you've done," Catherine said. "You can't unsee them now, but you can make amends. The question is whether you will..." Lawrence reached for his pen. not to sign the land acquisition papers. Those could wait. Might never be signed the same way again. Where do we start? He asked. Catherine's face didn't smile, but something in her eyes shifted. Recognition. Maybe. Or the beginning of respect. She placed the first family's information before him. We start with the Wilsons. Mary needs a proper house before her youngest catches pneumonia in that shanty. Lawrence nodded. He didn't know if redemption was possible. But sitting in his comfortable office doing nothing had become unbearable. Catherine extended her hand across the desk. Partners in this. He took it. Her grip was firm, her skin rough from work, not like the soft hands of society ladies at investor dinners. Partners. He agreed. The point of no return felt quiet. No dramatic declarations. Just Catherine's hand in his, and the choice to become someone different than the man who'd built an empire by not looking back. The Wilsons lived in a 2-room shanty at the edge of town. Lawrence had never been to this part of the settlement. Unpaved streets, ramshackle buildings, the smell of poverty and desperation. Catherine knocked. Mary Wilson opened the door, and her face hardened when she saw Lawrence. "What's he doing here?" "He's come to help," Catherine said. "May we come in?" Mary hesitated, then stepped aside. The interior was worse than Lawrence had imagined. One room served as kitchen, living space, and bedroom for 4 children. A curtain divided off a tiny second room. The walls let in drafts. The stove looked ready to collapse. The children hid behind their mother. Lawrence forced himself to speak. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm here to make this right. Tell me what you need." "I need my land back," Mary said flatly. "Can you give me that?" "No." "Then what good are you?" Catherine touched Mary's arm gently. "Let him try." "Mary, please." Mary's shoulders sagged. She looked exhausted beyond her years. "Fine. We need a real house. One with walls that don't leak and a stove that works. We need winter fuel. I need to get my children into school. But the fees." Her voice broke. Lawrence pulled out his notebook. "I'll have a house built, proper construction, good stove, insulated walls, school fees paid through the year, and I'll arrange immediate fuel delivery." Mary stared at him. "What? Because I should have done this before. Because your land was worth more than I paid. Because..." He stopped. The truth was harder. "Because I was wrong." The youngest child peeked out from behind Mary's skirts. She couldn't have been more than 4, with large eyes that had seen too much hardship. "When?" Mary asked. "Construction starts next week. Temporary housing and fuel delivered tomorrow. I'll believe it when I see it." Fair enough. Lawrence deserved her skepticism. They visited Thomas and Ellen Harper next. The elderly couple lived in a boarding house, sharing one room. Ellen's precious garden seeds saved in a cloth bag with nowhere to plant them. Ellen cried when Lawrence promised them a small house with land for a garden. Thomas just nodded, his weathered face unreadable. "My Ellen's hands need soil," he said simply. "Been 60 years she's had a garden. Can't end now." "She'll have one," Lawrence promised. The Mitchells were staying with relatives, their young marriage beginning in borrowed space, their dreams of an orchard deferred indefinitely. James Mitchell's anger was fresher than Mary's weariness. "You think money fixes what you took. You think a new house makes us even..." "No," Lawrence said. "I don't think we'll ever be even. But I can give you land for that orchard. I can build you a home. I can try. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't." "But Catherine does, and she's smarter than both of us." Catherine hid a small smile. By the week's end, Lawrence had met 12 families. Each visit stripped away another layer of his comfortable distance. These weren't abstractions or property disputes. They were mothers trying to keep children warm. Elderly couples facing displacement after lifetimes of work. Young families watching their futures crumble. His business associates noticed the expenses. His partner, Marcus, cornered him at the railroad office. "What's this about housing construction and compensation payments to families from old..." Acquisitions. Making things right. Lawrence said. Things were already right. Legal approved everything. Legal isn't the same as just... Marcus frowned. Is this about that widow people are talking? Lawrence, they're saying she's got you wrapped around her finger. People can talk. This is business. You can't run a railroad on sentiment. I've been running it without conscience, trying something different. Marcus shook his head. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But watching Ellen Harper cry over a plot of garden soil felt more right than any profit margin he'd calculated. Catherine found him in his office late one evening. Construction had begun on 3 houses. Temporary housing arranged for 5 families. School fees paid, fuel delivered. You're doing good work, she said. It's not enough. It's a start. She sat across from him, their workspace becoming shared territory. That's all redemption is, starting, then continuing. I don't know if I deserve redemption. None of us do. That's not how it works. She pulled out the ledger. 35 families left to help, and I've been investigating the early expansion records. There are others. Families that were never properly documented. Lawrence looked at the numbers. The cost would be enormous. His fortune wasn't infinite. How many others? I don't know yet. Maybe a dozen more. His empire, built on invisible suffering. The weight of it pressed against his chest. I'll do whatever it takes, he said. Catherine met his eyes. I believe you. That's why I'm still here. Something passed between them. Recognition, partnership, maybe the beginning of something more, though neither was ready to name it yet. Thank you, Lawrence said. For not letting me hide. Someone had to believe you could be better than your worst choices. I'm gambling you're one of them. She left him with the ledger. Lawrence sat in the lamplight, reading names, calculating costs, planning restorations. Outside, winter wind rattled the windows. But inside, something was beginning to thaw. By March, 5 families had been properly resettled. Lawrence worked alongside Catherine, and they fell into a rhythm. Mornings planning in his office, afternoons visiting construction sites and families, evenings reviewing progress and costs. The Wilsons moved into their new house on a cold Saturday. Lawrence watched Mary's children race through rooms that didn't leak, examine the sturdy stove, choose which spaces would be theirs. Mary stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. It's too much, she whispered. It's what you should have had from the beginning, Lawrence replied. The youngest daughter tugged his sleeve. Thank you, mister. Something cracked inside his chest. Ellen Harper planted her first seeds in her new garden plot despite the cold. They won't sprout yet, she said, kneeling in the soil with Thomas supporting her. But they'll wait. Seeds are patient. Lawrence knelt beside her. What are you planting? Tomatoes, beans, flowers for the table. She patted the earth. Land remembers gentle hands. Your railroad didn't know that. But you're learning. The Mitchell's house rose on a plot with southern exposure, perfect for the orchard they'd dreamed about. James remained skeptical, but Sarah let hope show on her face. We can start again, she said quietly, looking at the framed walls. It's not the same, but it's something. Lawrence's business relationships suffered. 3 investors withdrew. His partner Marcus resigned in protest. The railroad's board questioned his judgment in heated meetings. You're crippling the company. One board member accused, these expenditures are excessive. These expenditures are overdue, Lawrence corrected. The families were legally compensated. Legal isn't enough. Not anymore. The board voted to reduce his discretionary authority. Fine. He'd use his personal fortune instead. Catherine witnessed the board meeting from the hallway. Afterward, she found him at the Wilson house, watching the children play in their new yard. "You're losing your empire," she said. "I'm finding something better. Are you?" He turned to her. "I spent 5 years building something I was proud of. It took you one day to show me it was built on suffering. Yes, I'm losing the empire, but I'm not losing sleep anymore." Catherine smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her. "What?" he asked. "You're becoming someone your mother would recognize." The words landed gentle but deep. His mother, who'd taught him kindness before the world taught him fear. His mother, who'd have been ashamed of the man he'd become, and might be proud of who he was becoming. "I hope so," he said quietly. They walked through the neighborhood where 3 new houses stood. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children's voices carried on the wind. Fences marked gardens that would bloom in spring. "This is what your railroad could have been," Catherine said. "Progress that makes room for people." Lawrence looked at her, really looked. She'd done this work alone for 3 years, fighting for families with no one's help, powered by nothing but conviction and love for a dead husband's principles. "How do you keep going?" he asked. "When it's hard and people resist and it feels impossible, I remember why it matters. And I don't do it alone anymore." Their hands were close, almost touching. Lawrence became aware of the space between them, charged with possibility. "Catherine, not yet," she said gently. "We have work to do. The rest can wait." She was right. But Lawrence filed away the feeling, the almost touch. The growing certainty that redemption and love might grow from the same soil. April brought mud and melting snow. 8 families now lived in proper homes. Lawrence's personal fortune had decreased by 1/3. His railroad ran, but with new policies, full relocation assistance for any future land acquisitions. Compensation packages reviewed by community advocates. Families consulted before construction. The board hated it. Lawrence didn't care. One evening, working late in the office they now shared, Catherine told him about her husband. Daniel was a surveyor, but he believed land belonged to people first, profit second. He'd survey a route and find ways to avoid displacing families. The companies hated him for it. What happened? A developer tried to force a family off their land illegally. Daniel documented everything, prepared to testify. The developer's men confronted him. She paused. "There was an accident. Daniel fell from a ridge. They said it was carelessness. I knew better. I'm sorry. He died protecting what he believed in. I continue that work because letting go would dishonor his death." Lawrence understood. "You're stronger than I am." "No, just focus differently. You built an empire because you were afraid. I build nothing. I just protect what already exists. You built this." He gestured at the ledgers, the plans, the network of families being helped. "You built accountability when no one else would." Catherine's expression softened. "We built this together." The word hung between them. Together. Lawrence took a breath. "Why did you believe I could change after everything I'd done? Why gamble on me?" "Because I saw you that first night, sitting alone in your office, unable to sign those papers anymore. That was conscience trying to break through." She met his eyes. "And because I needed to believe men can choose differently, that fear doesn't have to win." Fear doesn't," Lawrence said. "You taught me that. Courage makes us kind." She smiled. "You remembered." "I remember everything you say." The moment stretched. Catherine stood, gathering papers. "It's late. We should stay," Lawrence said. "Just a few more minutes. Tell me about Daniel's work." The families he protected. So she did. And Lawrence listened, watching lamplight play across her face, feeling something grow that had nothing to do with guilt or redemption and everything to do with the woman sitting across from him when she finally left. The office felt empty in a way it never had before. The newspaper article appeared on a Thursday Railroad Baron makes amends. It detailed Lawrence's restitution work. The families helped, the money spent. The response split the town. Some praised his conscience. Reverend Michaels called it a moral example. Ellen Harper told a reporter, "He's trying. That's more than most would do." But others mocked him. Lawrence Keller's grown soft. The saloon talk went, letting some widow lead him around by his guilt. His remaining business partners threatened to sell their shares. "You're making us all look like thieves," one said at a tense meeting. "Maybe we are." Lawrence replied. The partnership dissolved. His railroad's expansion plans were canceled. Investors withdrew. The empire he'd built contracted, compromised by conscience. Worse came at a construction site. Lawrence was reviewing plans for the Mitchell's house when a man approached. Dutch Coleman, displaced 2 years ago, never properly compensated. "You're the Baron," Dutch said. His face was hard, worn by struggle. "Yes. If you're here about compensation, I don't want your charity." Dutch's voice carried rage barely contained. "You think building a few houses makes us even. You think your guilt is my problem. No. I lost everything because of your railroad. My land, my livelihood, my future. You took it all. And now you parade around playing saint, expecting everyone to applaud your conscience." Lawrence had no defense. "You're right. Nothing I do makes us even." "Damn right. I don't want your money. I want my land back, and you can't give me that. So take your redemption," and Dutch spat at Lawrence's feet. Catherine arrived, but Dutch turned on her too. "And you," dragging him around like a prize puppy who learned a trick. "He's still the man who destroyed us." "A few houses don't change that." Dutch walked away, his anger trailing behind him. Lawrence stood frozen. Catherine touched his arm, but he pulled back. "He's right." Lawrence said, "This is performance. I'm buying forgiveness with houses." "That's not true." "Isn't it I feel better when I help families? My guilt lessens." Dutch saw right through me. Catherine's face hardened. "Stop. Stop what facing the truth. Stop indulging in self-pity. Yes, helping families makes you feel better. So what, the Wilson children still have a warm house. Ellen Harper still has her garden. Your motives don't change their reality. But Dutch is angry. He has every right to be. Some people won't forgive you. Lawrence, ever. That's not a reason to quit. It's a reason to keep going anyway." Lawrence walked to the edge of the construction site. The town spread below, his railroad tracks cutting through it. How many Dutch Colemans were out there? How many people whose wounds he'd never heal? "I can't fix the past," he said quietly. "No. You can't undo what happened. But you can choose what happens next." Catherine stood beside him. Redemption isn't about deserving forgiveness. It's about doing right anyway. Even when it costs you everything. Even when they hate you. Even when it never feels like enough. What if it isn't enough? Then you'll die trying. And that's still better than dying comfortable and cruel. Lawrence looked at her. This woman who'd lost her husband to men like him, who had every reason to let him drown in guilt, who chose instead to believe he could be better. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "Because someone has to believe men can change. Because your railroad isn't the only thing that needs redemption. We all carry things we wish we'd done differently." She touched his hand briefly. "And because I see who you're becoming, and that man is worth the work." The moment broke when Catherine pulled another list from her bag. "I found 12 more families. Never properly documented, lost in the early expansion." Lawrence took the list. More names, more damage, more impossibility. "This will expose everything," he said. "Legal violations, missing records, families we never compensated at all. I know. I could face lawsuits, criminal charges, Maybe. I know that too. Lawrence studied the list. 12 families erased from record. Disappeared because his railroad's early work was rushed. Sloppy. Uncaring. We need to make this public, he said slowly. Full accounting. Not just helping quietly. Actually confessing what happened. That will cost you everything comfortable. Good. Comfortable is what let me ignore them in the first place. He met Catherine's eyes. I want to call a town meeting, full public confession. Every family, every failure. And I want you beside me when I do it. Catherine studied his face. This isn't performance. This is different. I'm tired of hiding behind partial redemption. If I'm going to make amends, I'm going to do it completely, publicly, accountably. The town will judge you. They should. I'm guilty. Catherine took his hand. This time he didn't pull away. Her grip was anchor and challenge both. Then we do it together, she said. The week before the town meeting, Lawrence couldn't sleep. He walked the railroad tracks at night, following the steel lines his company had laid. Each mile marker represented families he'd never counted. Each switching station sat on land taken from someone. Progress. He'd called it civilization. He'd said all the comfortable words that let him ignore the human cost. He remembered his mother's face when the bank foreclosed on their Ohio farm, how she'd stood in their empty house, touching the walls one last time, how young Lawrence had sworn never to be powerless again. He'd kept that vow. He'd built an empire. And in doing so, he'd become the foreclosure notice, the empty house, the powerless moment for 47 families, maybe more. The night before the meeting, Lawrence walked until dawn. The stars wheeled overhead. Coyotes called in the distance. The railroad tracks stretched endlessly, cold and unyielding. He thought about Dutch Coleman's anger, about Mary Wilson's exhaustion, about Ellen Harper's trembling hands, about all the faces he'd finally learned to see. Redemption wasn't possible. Not really. He couldn't undo the past, couldn't give Dutch his land back, couldn't restore those 5 years of lives disrupted, but he could stop hiding, could face the full accounting, could let the community judge him and commit to spending whatever remained of his life making it right. Dawn broke cold and clear. Lawrence returned to town, walked directly to Catherine's house, and knocked. She answered in her nightdress and shawl, concern crossing her face. Lawrence, it's barely light. I'm ready, he said. For the meeting, for all of it. I want to tell the truth. The whole truth. No excuses, no justifications, just what I did and what I'm trying to do now. Catherine studied him. This will cost you everything comfortable. I know, but staying comfortable costs more. It costs being the man I want to be, the man you're helping me become. I'm not making you into anything. You're choosing this. Because you showed me I could. Lawrence took her hands. Will you stand beside me when I confess when the town judges me? Yes. Why? Catherine smiled, sad and certain. Because 3 months ago, you couldn't see past your own fear. Now you're walking toward judgment voluntarily. That's not performance. That's transformation. She invited him in for coffee. They sat at her small table as dawn light filled the kitchen. Catherine showed him her notes, the full accounting she'd prepared. 47 families documented. 12 more newly found, dates, locations, compensation amounts, current circumstances. The ledger of his damage. Complete and undeniable. Some will forgive you, Catherine said. Some won't. Some, like Dutch, will hate you forever. Can you live with that? I'll have to. In your railroad, your fortune, your reputation, all built on suffering. If I lose them making things right, then I should lose them. Catherine reached across the table and took his hand. Then we do this together. Partners to the end. Partners. Lawrence agreed. They spent the day preparing. Catherine organized the documents. Lawrence wrote his confession. Editing until the words were honest and bare. No self-justification. No appeals for sympathy. Just truth. That evening, Catherine found him staring at the speech. Scared, she asked. Terrified. Good. Fear means you understand what's at stake. She sat beside him. You're doing the right thing. Not the easy thing. Not the comfortable thing. The right thing. Will it be enough? It'll be what you owe. Whether it's enough isn't for you to decide. Lawrence looked at the woman who'd crashed into his comfortable life and refused to let him hide. Who'd brought 47 families to stand in his conscience. Who'd shown him that courage could be kinder than fear. Catherine, when this is over, let's get through tomorrow first. I need to say this. When this is over, I want to ask you something. About the future. About partnership beyond just this work. Catherine's eyes softened. Ask me after the town meeting. After you've stood in front of everyone and told the truth. Then we'll talk about the future. You think I'll change my mind. I think you need to finish becoming the man you want to be. Then we'll see if that man still wants what you think you want now. Fair enough. Lawrence had spent 5 years being one man, 3 months becoming another. He needed to complete the transformation before promising anything. That night, he didn't walk the railroad tracks. He sat in his office, reading through the confession one more time, preparing to face everything he'd avoided. Outside, spring was coming. Inside, Lawrence Keller was finally ready to stand in the light. The church filled beyond capacity. Every pew packed. People standing along the walls, crowding the doorway. The displaced families sat in the front rows. Mary Wilson with her children. Thomas and Ellen Harper. James and Sarah Mitchell. Others Lawrence had helped. Others he hadn't. Dutch Coleman stood in the back, arms crossed, face hard. Lawrence's remaining business associates sat together, skeptical and cold. Townspeople filled the middle sections, curious or supportive or waiting to judge. Catherine sat in the front pew, the ledgers beside her. Lawrence stood at the pulpit, the full accounting in his shaking hands. Reverend Michaels had offered to introduce him. Lawrence declined. This wasn't about being introduced. This was about standing alone in his guilt. He began. I'm Lawrence Keller. For 5 years, I built a railroad by taking land from families and telling myself it was legal. Fair. Necessary. The church went silent. I was wrong. He opened the ledger. Started reading. Mary Wilson, 4 children, land taken, insufficient compensation provided. Thomas and Ellen Harper, married 53 years, homestead demolished, relocated poorly. James and Sarah Mitchell, 7 years of savings erased, dreams deferred, name after name, loss after loss. The litany of his damage read aloud for everyone to hear. Some families' entries were short. Clean acquisitions, proper compensation. Others detailed failures, missing paperwork. Lowball offers. Families who disappeared from records entirely. Lawrence read them all. His voice broke twice, but he continued. When he reached the 12 newly discovered families, the church stirred. These were the worst cases. People completely erased from documentation. Families who'd gotten nothing. Who'd been so thoroughly disregarded they didn't even make it into official records. I didn't just take land, Lawrence said, looking up from the ledger. I took homes, futures, security. I took what people built with their own hands and told myself it was progress. He set down the accounting. I saw property, not people. I saw profit, not pain. I counted dollars, not lives. And when my lawyer said everything was legal, I never asked if it was right. Ellen Harper was crying. So was Mary Wilson. Some people in the middle pews nodded. Others remained stone-faced. I can't undo what I did. I can't give Dutch Coleman his land back. Lawrence looked at Dutch, still standing in the back. I can't restore those 5 years of disrupted lives. Some damages can't be repaired. He pulled out the second document. But I'm spending the rest of my life trying. I've established a restitution fund. Every displaced family will receive proper compensation, relocation assistance, and housing support. Catherine Morrison will oversee the fund to ensure I keep my word. Catherine stood, showing the community the ledgers, the plans, the commitments. My railroad policies are changing. Lawrence continued, no more forced displacement. Full value plus relocation costs for any land acquisition, family welfare prioritized over expansion speed. And this community holds me accountable. If I break these promises, you'll know. He gripped the pulpit. This was the hardest part. Some of you won't forgive me. That's just, some won't trust me. That's fair. I don't deserve your forgiveness or trust. I deserve your judgment. But I'm asking for the chance to make amends, not because it earns redemption, but because it's what I owe. The church remained silent. Lawrence stepped down from the pulpit, walking to stand before the front pew, before the families he'd harmed. I'm sorry, he said simply. To all of you. I'm sorry. Ellen Harper stood. Her voice was shaky but clear. I got my garden back. My Thomas got to see me plant seeds again before he dies. That's something. Thomas nodded, gripping his wife's hand. Mary Wilson stood next. My children have a warm house. They're in school. We're not equal. Mr. Keller, we never will be. But you're trying. That's more than I expected. James Mitchell remained seated, but Sarah stood beside Mary. We can plant our orchard this spring. It's not the same dream, but it's a dream again. Not everyone stood. Not everyone forgave. Dutch Coleman walked out, his boots loud on the wooden floor. Several others followed, but some stayed. Some nodded. Some chose to witness rather than judge. Reverend Michaels stepped forward. The church thanks you for your honesty, Mr. Keller. Confession is the first step. May your actions prove your words. The meeting ended. People filed out, conversations buzzing. Some paused to shake Lawrence's hand. Others passed without acknowledgment. Catherine waited until the church emptied. Then she approached, the ledgers in her arms. You did it, she said. I faced it. That's not the same as fixing it. It's the same as starting to fix it. She smiled. And that's all any of us can do. Start, then continue. Outside. Spring evening painted the sky gold and purple. The railroad tracks gleamed in the distance. Lawrence's empire, smaller now but honest. He looked at Catherine. I said I'd ask you something after this. I remember. Will you help me continue this work? Not just the restitution, but building something different. A railroad that makes room for people. A life that repairs instead of ruins. Are you asking me to work with you or marry you? Both, if you'll have me. Catherine set down the ledgers. I accept on one condition. We build more than houses. We build a community center, a place for displaced families to gather, receive support, tell their stories. Your money, my management, their dignity. Yes, whatever you need. She took his hands. Then yes, I'll work with you. I'll marry you. I'll help you remember that prophet without conscience destroys. They stood in the empty church, spring light fading, the work of Amends stretching ahead of them. Unfinished, ongoing, but no longer carried alone. The wedding took place in April at the same church where Lawrence had confessed. Small ceremony. Simple vows. The families they'd helped attended. Ellen Harper brought flowers from her garden. Mary Wilson's children scattered petals. Dutch Coleman didn't come, but he sent a note. Lawrence kept it in his pocket. Maybe you mean it. Time will tell. Fair enough. Time would tell. Lawrence and Catherine built their home on a plot overlooking the valley. But the house shared the land with something more important, a community center. Meeting rooms, assistance offices, gathering spaces, a place where displaced families could receive support, share stories, advocate for themselves. Catherine managed it. Lawrence funded it. The families owned it. By June, 10 of the 12 newly discovered families had been found and helped. The restitution fund operated under Catherine's strict oversight. Every dollar accounted for, every family treated with dignity. The railroad still ran, but under new leadership and new principles, expansion slowed, consultation increased. When routes required land acquisition, families were included in planning from the beginning. Fair compensation plus relocation became standard, not exception. Lawrence's fortune shrank. His empire contracted. Some business associates never forgave him, but he slept better than he had in 5 years. One evening, Lawrence and Catherine sat on their porch, watching sunset paint the valley. Ellen Harper's garden bloomed in the distance. The Wilson house chimney smoked. The Mitchells' young orchard showed first green leaves. "Do you regret it?" Catherine asked. "Everything you lost." "I regret what I did to earn it, not what I spent making it right." She took his hand. "You're becoming the man your mother would recognize." "I hope so." He pulled out Dutch's note, worn from reading. "Some won't forgive me. I understand that. Redemption isn't about earning forgiveness. It's about doing right anyway." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. The railroad tracks gleamed in moonlight, cutting through the valley, but now Lawrence saw both the tracks and the homes alongside them, both progress and people. His life's work used to be expansion, profit, empire. Now it was repair, restoration, amends. The work would never be finished. There would always be another family needing help, another wrong to address, another chapter in the long accounting of his conscience. But he wasn't alone in it. Catherine worked beside him. The community held him accountable, and every family properly resettled was one stone lifted from the weight he'd carried. Inside the community center, lights glowed. A support group met there tonight. Families sharing experiences, finding solidarity. Tomorrow, Lawrence would meet with new arrivals seeking assistance. The day after, construction would begin on housing for 2 more families. The railroad still ran, but conscience ran deeper. Lawrence looked at his wife, this woman who'd crashed into his comfortable life and refused to let him hide, who'd brought 47 families to stand in his conscience and shown him that courage could be kinder than fear. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For believing I could be better than my worst choices." Catherine smiled. "You did the work. I just held the mirror." They went inside as night settled over the valley, the work of redemption waiting for tomorrow. The piece of partnership sustaining them tonight, Lawrence's empire was gone. But he'd built something better in its place, a life measured not in miles of track or profits earned, but in families helped, dignity restored, and love grown from the soil of shared purpose. The man who'd built an empire by not looking back had finally learned to face forward by first facing his past. The railroad baron had become something simpler and better, a man trying to make amends, one family at a time, for the rest of his life. And that was enough.